5 tips for having difficult conversations with your child. You love your child, but sooner or later, a tough conversation needs to happen. While this is normal, and after all, what family relationships don't have their bumps along the way, how you handle those conversations will determine whether you come away from this particular conflict with a stronger appreciation for each other. This is why it's important to handle difficult conversations well. So, how do you ensure you engage in the best conversation possible in these circumstances? First of all, start with not putting off the talk longer than necessary. Take time to count to 10 or take those deeper belly breaths before beginning. Starting with too much emotion will be more damaging than helpful. So there's sort of things bubbling up underneath, and maybe your breathing has become quicker, you're more nervous or concerned in one way or another, which then of course your brain can't think clearly, and perhaps sometimes things come out of our mouth quicker than we can think through. We've all been there. So once you've calmed down a little bit, it's time to talk. You can't delay it anymore. Delaying it, putting it off, tends to make it worse. By putting things off, you tend to build up the resentment or perhaps inflate the conflict. Our mind can easily distort situations or things that need to happen, and then of course making it worse. So a small problem today is much easier to solve than a giant one in several weeks from now. Next, drop the good news, bad news approach. No child, teenager likes waiting for that but to come along. You know, when you've been sort of almost like the sandwich, you've been, oh, this is good, but. Most people know there's a but coming along, and nobody likes that. Of course, we set ourselves up for that, which could potentially cause immediate defensiveness or reaction. So if you're determined to add in the compliment, do so after the bad stuff is out of the way, or the most important topic that you need to talk about. So you leave your child or teenager on a positive note. The third thing, plan your conversation. Rather than overwhelm your child with an uncomfortable discussion, let them know you have something you want to talk to them about. Make it clear that you're wanting to discuss something that affects your feelings rather than starting out in an attack, almost like a finger pointing. So there's a vast difference between, I'd like to talk to you sometime about your phone use, such as most older children and teenagers stuck on their phone. So I know it's a conversation, it's a very difficult conversation for many parents. So so the difference between I'd like to talk to you sometime about your phone use versus I'd like to talk to you about how I feel when I see you on your phone most of the time. And I'm going to repeat those. So rather than I'd like to talk to you sometime about your phone use, immediately barriers come up, almost like the finger pointing, there's something wrong. Instead, I'd like to talk to you about how I feel when I see you on your phone most of the time. So you're not using a big word such as always, you're using most of the time, which also means that sometimes they're not on their phone, but also how it makes you feel. And that's a huge way of being able to diffuse any initial defensiveness or reaction coming in. Now think about, what are your goals? In any heavy conversation or difficult conversation, you need to agree at some point on common goals. Working toward the same thing will help you find your way through the conversation to that eventual place, and of course strengthening your family relationships. So going back to the example of the phone, if you could have set goals, is there certain boundaries that you need to both adhere to? Is there certain things such as that your child or teenager can be on their phone as long as they have done all their homework to the best of their ability? I'm sure you can come up with your own boundaries. And lastly, keep a positive spirit. Aim for optimism. Even if the conversation isn't going how you would like it to, or perhaps how you thought it would in your head, finding something to hope for will soften the outcome no matter what's going on. So difficult conversations are just that, difficult. But having a plan in place will help you to get through them. Use these steps to build the framework of your conversation with your child, teenager, or maybe even your spouse. And even if the outcome is not as great, getting there won't be as difficult as you think.